Power Lunch, a new era is beginning for college sports. Effective today, colleges and universities are now permitted to directly compensate their student athletes. Just outright pay them with a paycheck. Let's bring in Alex Sherman to discuss just how much money is actually on the table, as well as what the competitive implications are, not just for each team, but for amateur/pro sports and pro sports outright.
Right, it's hard to know what's amateur and what's pro these days. Right?
There's not anything anymore. They're all just, right. Everyone gets paid.
So what we know now is that really what's going to happen is the big time college sports, whether it's mainly football and basketball, and obviously there's a slew of Power 5 schools that will pay up to $20.5 million per year for their athletes. It is at their discretion how they divvy up that money. But broadly speaking, most of it will go to football. There are certain schools, obviously, that are big-time college basketball programs that don't have football programs. So those schools will be at an advantage to compete in basketball because that's where they'll skew their funds. But you can spend up to $20.5 million. You don't have to spend all of the money, but obviously to compete at the highest levels, you will spend all of it because otherwise you will be at a disadvantage competitively.
How complicated do you think this makes the calculation, not just for the schools running the programs themselves, for boosters and everybody else in the ecosystem? Because now that you have, in essence, what is a salary cap, right? If you wanted to spend if you were Alabama football and you want to spend a lot of this $20.5 million on football, you also have a very decent D1 college basketball program. Yep. So are you this is a resource allocation decision at this point?
Yeah,
right?
Look, I mean, theoretically, this should, I don't know if simplify is the right word, but it should at least flatten the playing field among the major schools so that you're moving out of this system of NIL collectives where it was really the Wild West. It was just however much money you could raise, great. All of that money can be then thrown to these athletes, and there would be these major bidding wars. Now that there's a cap, in essence, you're saying, okay, of all of the schools that are going to pay up to that, at least they can all kind of compete fairly against each other because they can only spend up to a certain amount of money. That said, you're right. It will be up to the schools to figure out, is it worth it for us to throw a few $1 million at a certain sport because we feel like there's some sort of added benefit to doing that? The economics tend to skew toward the big ones, so my guess is that the bulk of the money will just go to the football programs at all of these schools, and the smaller sports will be left at a relative disadvantage.
Right. Because the other major news item, the big change here, is that all of the NIL stuff now has to go through a clearinghouse. Is that right?
Right. So
the clearinghouse could potentially, and here's the thing, we don't know what's going to happen. If the clearinghouse ends up denying 9 out of 10 deals or something like that, or saying in order for you to receive this compensation, there has to be an endorsement product that really goes with it, and really, kind of stepping down on that, okay, fine, then the $20 million is the whole pot. But if that's not what happens, and they're just basically rubber stamping stuff, then the $20 million, to Dom's point, is just a floor. And then those NIL numbers continue to be what they are. Do we have any sense yet just how stringent and strict the clearinghouse is going to be?
So the idea behind the clearinghouse, the numbers so Deloitte sort of is the enforcement agency of the clearinghouse. And then there's also another commission called the College Sports Commission, which is an enforcement of this sort of college spending. So there's kind of two ways of looking at NIL. There's the $20.5 million. That's the money that the colleges will pay the players. Then the outside NIL money will then run through this clearinghouse that Deloitte will basically say, is this a fair deal? And the purpose of the clearinghouse is so that you can't, in essence, go over the $20.5 million cap and come up with some ridiculous number and say like, oh yeah, we're just paying for NIL rights for some video game and here's $8 million. And that would give certain schools an advantage and not others. Then there's sort of another category of NIL, which is this direct endorsement branding deals. That's where the system wants things to go. They want to move away from the NIL collective, and that's why they're bringing in Deloitte to be sort of the armed force, the agency here, and say, look, do a deal directly with a brand, because we know a public company,
Which
we
I
know
thought was the
those
whole
deals
idea when
are
they're saying
probably fine. And that's what Deloitte has said, that 90% of the public company deals will probably become unchanged. It's these private company deals.
It was always weird to me that by allowing the athletes to receive a compensation, that somehow it was coming from alumni instead of from the companies themselves.
Right.
Like, shouldn't the whole point be if the company wants to pay
there are
to
some
endorse
companies.
somebody?
Well, some companies do. I mean, Roback, just as an athleisure wear company, was a pioneer in this. They had signed their student athletes and some high-profile ones over the course of the last few years. I don't exactly know what the payment profile or parameters were, but these athletes were wearing their gear, and if you use like a certain code or you buy it through them, I don't know how they get paid, but they got paid by a company.
Yeah, that's right. So Kelly's point, the donors, that money will move toward the colleges. So you will donate to the college.
Right.
The college will then push that money toward the players. The NIL collectives, many of them will shut down. Smaller schools will probably keep them open because they won't pay up to that $20.5 million. So they'll need every penny they can get from outside donors if they can get it. And then there will be these third category of deals, which will be between the company and the athlete directly. And those deals will probably be more or less unchanged.